What is up, guys? Hello. Today we're going to be doing some Monday Manna coming at you live with Genesis chapter 7. So you don't have to send me any memes, Cody, right? But we're going to go be at Genesis chapter 7. We left off last time in verse around 16 to 19. I put in the description 16, but I'm pretty sure it's 19. My bad. But we'll get into that. And let's get into a word of prayer before we start. I got to pray always. Sometimes I forget, but you got to do it. Lord, I love you. I praise you. Thank you for this day you've given us. I pray that you can just give me the words. Help me to for the people that are listening to this, that we can just dive into your word and learn more about the creation of this beautiful earth that you have given, that we can know of our history, Lord, the history of this world, and what you have done to create a way for your Son, Jesus Christ. We love you. Praise you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. So, with that being said, let's get into it. Okay, we have to get into the... we last left off at verse 19 when we talked about, it was actually 16, how, actually no, yeah, it was 19 to 20, because what we ended off last time was that the earth was like so covered with water that it was actually above the highest mountain, which is Mount Everest, about 15 cubits, which is about... I did the math last time. I don't know math now, but it was a lot. So it was like over 20 feet or something over Mount Everest, which is insanely high. So that shows the sheer amount of water and how much God has sent this great flood to just destroy everything on earth that has the breath of life. So not fish. Fish and stuff, of course, are good because, it's water. They can just swim in it, right? Sorry about that. I had to turn my fan off. But, so getting back into it. So we left off at that Genesis 19, and in 20, again, like I said, 15 cubits upwards, the water prevail, and the mountains were covered. All mountains, the highest mountain on the world. Everything was just completely covered and filled with the water, right? As we say, kind of this judgment is universally going out to the world, and the one thing that is saving Noah is the ark, right? Which is his faithfulness, his trusting God, and he's doing the things that God's called him to do. Obviously, the literal ark is saving him, though, because he did what God told him to do, though. That's often what happens in our own life, right? When we do the thing, it's not conditional, right? But when we do the stuff that God has put out for us, it helps us. It blesses us, and it can keep us from wrecking ourselves, right? From incurring the judgment of God, because though we will get chastised, right? God is a just God, but even with his children, right? He can chastise us, and sometimes we can incur our own chastisement and judgment because of the sins that we do. Again, ultimately, we know that we're saved by God, and we're in his will, and he has saved us from the ultimate wrath, from going to hell. But if you put your faith and trust in him, but chastisement and things like that can happen to us because we're stupid humans, right? That continue to sin. So continuing on, verse 21, and all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. I have it in King James Version. Let's go to New King James, just so that y'all can understand this better. But I like the creepeth, right? And it's so funny, too. I love that word creeping, because it so describes, right, creeping things, right? What is creeping things? Well, creeping things is spiders, snakes, lizards, right? Think of a thing that creeps, right? And it's basically that. And basically what is going on is just Moses, whoever wrote this, right, is describing how everything that has the breath of life, that has the breath of life, and we're going to see in verse 22, let's read that, and all whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life, aka they have to breathe to live, all that was on the dry land died. So they're saying anything that had to breathe, anything that had lungs, right, that needed to breathe air, oxygen, right? And we know this because in the beginning, the creation account of Adam, it says God breathed into Adam the breath of life, right? He has to breathe. Us as humans, we have to breathe to live. We can't breathe in water like a fish, right? Because that's not how our body's made. And it's just saying everything that breathes, so, fish and stuff, dolphins, whales, all that type of animals, fish, and things in the sea, they were completely fine. They just kept swimming along. They probably liked it, honestly. Had more, they could just swim where they can never be. So that's what's going on in verse 22. And I think it's actually, there was this debate, I forget, between, it was this atheist and a, this gets in the context, but this atheist and this good Christian philosopher, and it was real famous because he stumped the atheist. He was telling, "Oh, do you believe every word in the Bible?" And of course, the scholar said, "Yes, of course." And he said, "Well, do you believe? Then you believe fish died when in the flood, then?" And so this is where context matters so much, right? Because even the scholar, the Christian scholar, even we can get tripped up when we don't read the context, because context is king, right? We have to read the context and understand what is going on. And without that, we can draw up a lot of conclusions. This is just one case, and I was reading about it as I was researching this. It shows how context is really something that matters, and that we need to take serious about the Bible, right? Like one thing, actually, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Pet peeve. It's not a pet peeve. It's a common misconception, right? In Genesis, let's actually get to it. I think it's kind of a cool misconception. Okay, so we can see right here, this is actually a common misconception, because I think context isn't taken. I guess you can do different translations, but in the New King James, and you can even take a look. We can take a look at a couple different. And this is just, I want to get into context because I think it's kind of cool. So he drove out man, and we've gone over this, but I think it's cool because oftentimes when people think of like the two cherubim at the garden, they think of them with two flaming swords, but actually it's just two cherubim and then a flaming sword, like a magical flaming sword. So I just want to read this real quick. So he drove out man, and he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword, which turned every way to guard the way of the tree of life. So you can see that these are actually two different things. The cherubim are the east of the garden, so like the entrance, presumably guarding from Adam and Eve coming back, and a flaming sword was at the tree. So this is just a magical flaming sword going around the tree, killing anything that comes close. So I don't know, kind of cool context things, but again, we need to take context, and especially in the Bible, right? You get bad doctrine when you don't take context, and that's what happens, what can happen. So continuing on, 23, verse 23. So he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping thing, and bird of the air were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. So this is just an overview, again, pounding in, saying, hey, everything died. Nothing survived at all, period. Fish survived, of course. But nothing survived on the earth, human, anything that had the breath of life. But only things that did survive were the things that were in the ark with Noah. All the birds, mammals, and creeping things and everything like that was in the ark survived. But everything else died. So in verse 24, again, giving an overall how the whole flood account is happening within 150 days. And at the end of the 150 days that we're going to see in chapter 8 is where where it ends. So continuing on, we're going to get a little bit into this, and then we'll save the rest for the next one, because I don't kind of like to stop midway through chapters, but let's start this one up. So chapter 8, verse 1, and God remembered Noah and every living thing, all the animals that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. Now, I love this because we can actually see throughout the Bible this phrase, remember, right? We can see that, heck, you can even look it up in Blue Letter Bible. Yeah, I just looked it up now. 29 times in 12 different verses we see God remembered. Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Psalms, all these things. And the idea is, what does that mean when God remembers? Well, when God remembers, it's not just kind of like how us humans were just like, oh yeah, I remembered the other day when I did so and so. When we see God remembering a person, specifically it's typically people, right? In the Psalms, right? Like I showed in the references, typically in the Psalms, David was like, remember me, for what I've done, or remember me this day. And the idea is to remember them so that he can act. Because when God remembers a person, it's not just, oh, I'm thinking of you, hey, hope you have a good day. No, he acts, he does things. And that's oftentimes, again, when David says, he says, Lord, remember me. He's like asking God to remember him, because we know when God remembers us, he acts. It's not just a thought process. He acts and he does stuff for us, and not just does stuff, right? What does he do? He saves. He helps us in our time of need. This is what happens when God remembers a person. And this is what's happening now. God's remembering Noah and remembering all the things that he said, the promises that he made to Noah, and how he will save Noah. And he's not just going to let, the water continue on the earth forever, or Noah's going to die too, right? So he's remembering Noah and every living thing. So everything he's made, he's remembering, he's acting. Now he is setting a wind, which interestingly, right, when we think about it, because it's kind of a weird idea, how is a wind blowing the waters to subside? And honestly, at this point, waters have completely covered the earth. So the globe, if taken from a satellite view, would just be completely covered in water. So what's wind gonna do, right? How could a wind blow it and then it's just gonna subside? Well, a couple of things. One, when God could have created, and here's the thing, God's God, so supernatural things are hard to explain, right? Because they're supernatural. But a couple of things. God could simply blow the water and actually blow it up into the atmosphere, right, and create clouds, right? We know all clouds are just moisture, water in the air. So he could blow a lot of the water up into the clouds, make clouds, and then, but here's the thing, that's a ton of water, right? We already know that was 20 feet above Mount Everest. So how is he doing this? Well, I think this really is just a supernatural thing. The whole flood account is supernatural. Water is gushing from the earth. Truly, just a supernatural amount of water is coming in. But we do know one thing is that, again, there is this aquifer. I think it's right around Canada. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so this may be the one I'm talking about, but I know that there's another one this side right here. A massive size freshwater sea is buried beneath the ocean, and this is just one of them. We know throughout the world there is tons of aquifers, which aquifer is basically, this one is actually spans nearly 220 miles. So that's a ton. That's all the way, that's, yes, 280, 800 cubic meters. And so that's huge, right? But I know of I can't remember of the specific aquifer, but that's just one case. There's tons of aquifers throughout the world, and so I think what's happening is God's blowing it, and as well, causing it to just go in the ground for aquifers to form and for the water to go in the earth. And actually, in verse 2 gives a bit more context. The fountains of the deep, which are aquifers, right? Aquifers, fountains of the deep. And the windows of the heaven were also stopped, and the rains from the heaven was restrained. So aquifers are stopped gushing out water. So if they're stopped gushing out water, well, they can fill back up with the water that's on the earth. So they're filling back up. God's blowing a wind and he could blow a wind downward to, kind of speed up the process and make them go back in the earth quicker. So that seems to be what's going on. Again, this whole thing is supernatural. God has his hands clearly in this, that he can protect Noah and his family. And again, he's remembering, he's acting and directly doing this. Without God's intervention, it would just be Noah in his ark until he starves to death, right? But God's remembering Noah, God's acting. This is what we see in our relationship with God, right? When God remembers us, he remembers us for his servant's sake, right? For Jesus' sake. And he remembers us and he acts, right? So that's the one thing I would encourage people. Hey, if you're going through a hard time, pray that the Lord remembers you, that he can act in your situation, because when he remembers us, he does act. And I think it's a beautiful thing. So continuing on in verse 3, and the waters receded continually from the earth. Again, receded. They're going back in these aquifers. They're going back in these huge sized aquifers and just spreading throughout the earth. At the end of the 150 days, the water decreased. So the water is heavily decreasing. and they're finally getting to a point to where they're actually, in verse 4 is where we're going to see they land. And the ark rested in the 7th month, so in July, the 17th day of the month, which is actually my birthday. So that's pretty cool. On the 7th day, on my birthday, the ark finally rested on the mountains of Ararat. Now, with that being said, mountains of Ararat, where is that? Well, the mountains of Ararat, boom, bada bing, bada boom, is over right around here. So the mountains of Ararat is right here. We see these two. That's the lesser Ararat, and I know it's in a different language, but this is where Ararat is, Mount Ararat. That's Mount Ararat, and then lesser Mount Ararat. Now, Mount Ararat is about, we can actually click on it. See, Little Ararat, and then Mount Ararat. Oh, I got them confused. But Mount Ararat, and these are, I think, around 5,000 feet above sea level. And they're actually 2 volcano peaks, which is, they're snow-capped, but they're pretty dang big. You can see with this picture, they're pretty big. So this is the Mount Ararat, and they could have been, I mean, it just says Mount Ararat. This is Little Ararat. We don't know which one specifically. This is actually kind of a bigger picture. This is one of them, and I think to the left of it would be, I guess that would be Mount Ararat, and that's Lesser Ararat. They're around the same height, though. The Little Ararat's just, again, a little small. Yeah, you can see the peak is 3,925 meters. So these are very high above the ground, above sea level. So as soon as it rests, but that doesn't mean that the waters are completely subsided, but that means they've subsided enough to where that they can rest, that the ark can rest on this mountain. That's actually, we're going to see that he sends out some birds to scavenge in just a second. So again, pretty cool. On my birthday, he rests on Mount Ararat. And for some context too, where is Mount Ararat in the world? Well, we can see Iraq is over here, Baghdad's right here, Babylon, to put in perspective, is right around here. It historically, it would be right around here. Israel's right here, Lebanon's right here, so that's kind of an idea. Egypt's right there. That's Turkey, right? That would be like, Turkey is modern day Assyria, I think. I could be mistaken on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So this is kind of where it's at. Now, one thing I should be mentioned, we don't know where Noah made the actual ark. I looked back because I was sitting there as I was studying, and I was like, do we know? And comment down below. Maybe I'm just missing something, but I don't. Biblically, there doesn't say of anything where Noah made the ark, right? Because the genealogy just goes straight from Adam and then to him, and we don't know, because the father of Noah, we know previously was Lamech, and we don't know where Lamech lives. So the reason why I say this is because if we knew where he lived, I mean, because for all we know, we just don't know. We don't know where Eden was, and presumably they would have stayed around Eden because he's from the line of Adam. And it would be kind of cool to know where he made the ark, to see how far they would have drifted, right? But again, who knows? Because this is the thing too. If you actually, well, we can't look at the whole globe right now, but if you look at the globe, you can see that when the fountains of the deep, as described, right, burst forth, when the water's bursting forth from the earth and from these aquifers, it's actually changing the terrain. So even if we did have, it wouldn't be the same. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't be the same, honestly, because the whole geometry of the earth moved and shifted, right? We know of tectonic plates, right? We learned about that in kind of, in geology, right, in school. And the entire world changed. LOL, that's actually kind of funny. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry, I wanted to look at this. Oh, shoot. No, I don't want to move this. Look, it says, that's kind of funny. It's raining a lot here where I'm at, and we're talking about the flood. I just thought that was kind of funny. I thought I'd mention that. But, so the entire earth, though, has been changed, right? We know that, I think I've mentioned it before, but Pangea. So Pangea would have been the Earth with everything sort of formed together. This is kind of a depiction of what we think everything kind of put together would look like. But again, it probably would be more cohesive. But this is the entire world put together, because you can see that you can actually fit it together fairly well. And what happened, and it makes sense, right, with the flood, that everything was one large landmass. And what happened in the flood is that the fountains of the deep, they burst forth, waters gushing from the earth, and it cracked and created the continents. And I mean, if it's going on for 150 days, it's constantly moving the tectonic plates and shifting everything around to where, you know, and the reason I say all this, because we don't know where Noah could have, originally been making the ark, because everything's shifting and moving. We know eventually he ended up again in Mount Ararat and around here where, modern day Armenia, well, basically right by it, in Turkey, but on the border. So, it would have been cool. I mean, think about it. What a kind of a cool idea, maybe, if he would have been in modern day, heck, who knows, Canada, right? He made it, and then everything shifted and changed, and then he ends up in Mount Ararat, right? It'd be just kind of something cool to know. But again, we just don't have that information. So, again, I mean, all the names are changed too. So, but just something to put out there. So, continuing on. So they're on Mount Ararat on the 17th day, and the waters continually to decrease. And so it's continually decreased to the 10th month. So to the 10th month, which is September, right? September. And in the 10th month, the first day of the month, so September 1st, the tops of the mountains were seen. So they're able to see other mountains. They're able to find like everything's subsiding enough to where, different mountains are being able to be seen. Because obviously it's not Mount Ararat. It could be, but, that doesn't really make any sense, right? They're already resting, the ark is. So it's on Mount Ararat, and then now it's basically just saying this: the waters are continuing to decrease because they can now see other mountains. So it's decreasing at a rapid pace, right? So just in a couple months and 3 months from July, right? So it came to pass at the end of the 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he made, and he sent out a raven, which kept going to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. So he's sending a bird to see, hey, is everything good? Is that way he would know if everything's dried up. And so it's going back and forth and to where he can see if it's dry, right? And interestingly, raven, we actually know raven to be an unclean bird. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But what's kind of funny is that he sends out a raven, but then immediately after that, he sends out this dove. But actually, I'll hold that off for the next episode. But he's sending out a raven, and it's going to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. So it's basically just a way so he can know if it's drying up or not, right? And why is that a way to know if it's dry? Well, he would know if it's dry is if the raven comes back, he knows it's not dry, right? The waters are still subsiding, right? Still too much water to where the raven's not going to make a home for itself, so we know it's not good for him. It's it's not ready for him to go out. That's why he sends out a bird. So, as we're going to see with the dove. So with that being said, hopefully y'all enjoyed. Oh wow, I'm all out of focus. Hopefully y'all enjoyed. Can I focus? Hopefully y'all enjoyed today's Monday Manna. I was not focusing on me. I will talk to you and see you later. Hopefully you just enjoyed this one. I know I love being able to go through Genesis because it's a great book, and we should all just study it, because this is the history of our world, right? This is the history of what happened, and this is history, right? This isn't fiction. This isn't. I know some people like to think Genesis is just a parable or metaphorical. No, this is history, and we have to understand that this is what's happening during the earth in its early stages, and what's God doing, and what God is ultimately making the way for the Messiah, right, for Jesus. So it's amazing thing. And hopefully you enjoyed this. And with that being said, think about yourself a whole lot less. Think about God a whole lot more. Y'all take it easy.